Live with our 207th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back. I know it's been a couple of weeks since Ken and I were live, since we posted an episode. We're excited to be here. We've had some live things going on. There's a lot to catch up on, a lot to do, or to just review today. We've got articles upon articles upon articles. I doubt we're going to get to them all, just based on how we usually operate. As far as upcoming events, if you are looking for secure code review training, DEF CON is the next public course that we will be offering. That's in August, at least that we currently have on our calendars. There might be some other stuff that pops up over the summer earlier than August, but I will post the link, training.defcon.org. Hold on, I had it up and then I didn't copy and paste it properly. Training.defcon.org for the Las Vegas trainings. We will be involved in other trainings with DEF CON over the course of this year in multiple different locations. So if you're interested in secure code review, jump in there or let us know. I mean, we're more than open to hosting or applying at other conferences to teach this course. And yeah, would love to do it. As far as other things that are going on, I will actually be in Madrid in about a week and a half at Cybertrax. Got invited to speak there. So I'm getting on planes and flying around and, we'll do just a talk at that one, not doing a training. That one when we didn't, they don't do trainings at that conference. Anyway, so Cybertrax in Madrid. If you're going to be there, let me know. We'll have some Absolute AppSec swag with me. Would love to hook up and go out and have drinks and enjoy local culture, that kind of thing. Ken, any other places? Like where else are you going to be coming up? You're muted.
Oh yeah, but that's what you want to do when you're on a podcast. Just mute yourself. No, that's awesome about Spain, man. Didn't know you're going there. That's cool. Madrid is a lot of fun, so you should have a good time. Nowhere I'm traveling, thankfully, at the moment. That was a lot of travel, so just enjoying a few weeks of downtime. Did want to announce that my company, or James Wickett and I's company, Dry Run Security, had our official launch today. I'll post a link here in a moment. But yeah, I'm just really stoked because we're going into private beta, and I've been talking and thinking and kind of cultivating this idea with James, but over just like years of practicing, we'll say, the concept of contextual security analysis, meaning just using a scanner as a control point, it's not enough. So, anyways. We launched a company to address this. Like I said, we went live today, or launched today. So I'll post a link. But I'm stoked. I really am.
Yeah, we're excited to see what you're gonna. Yeah, well, I'm excited to see what you guys are coming up with and what you're generating. Because I know from a consulting perspective, and obviously we've been in the industries, we've had a lot of discussions, and I probably have more knowledge of what you're working on. But from a consulting perspective, the amount of contextual analysis that we end up doing, because there isn't tools that are out there that actually help us with that, and the amount of time that we spend or we see clients spend on that sort of stuff, right? It's definitely an area ripe for improvement. So excited to see what it is, and go ahead, post the link. Let us know how things go. Yeah.
If I can pull it up, my computer's going. This is so sad. Like I've been so busy. I have this M1 Mac, right? That this not an M1 Mac that I'm on, and I just need to load it up. And like, I'm literally just always using my machine so much that I just haven't found the time to convert over to the other machine. Anyways, all that to say, it's really slow going to get these links. But here is sort of the tweet about it. So anyways, just excited. I'll explain more about contextual security analysis as time goes on, but you can think of it as collecting a lot of data points to determine where risk lies in your ships so that you can actually know where to place your efforts versus just,
Yeah.
kind of like hoping that your security champions might catch something passing through, or hoping that your team might get pinged on it, or that maybe a scanner finds something potentially.
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
sort
and
of just not enough, right? So that's the
yeah, it
idea.
totally is, right? And I mean, we've had this discussion multiple times from a scanning perspective, right? From a tooling perspective, is the amount of false positives, right? There's a reason that we have a problem with static analysis tools, or we don't rely on them heavily, and it's basically that the missing context that's there, right? Yeah. How many times do we see MD5, right, being pulled up as a finding for like, oh, and it's not even being used in a security context? That kind of thing is, I mean, I've spent way too much time over the course of my career actually trying to identify that stuff. So awesome to hear, awesome to see. I did post the blog entry, Ken. I found it from Try Run
Thank
Security.
you.
So, yep.
Oh, you did. Okay,
So,
cool. I'm trying to, yeah, just
yeah.
very slow, it seems like today, with my
Yeah.
machine. So anyways, yeah,
No worries.
cool. We
Cool.
got a lot to get into. It's going to be a
Yeah.
busy podcast episode, that's for sure.
Yeah. Where do you want to start? Like, there's that cookie analysis stuff, right? Or the cookie bugs. It was an interesting research article. Or if we want to talk about attacks against package managers, and other, I don't know. Like, where do you want to start? What piques your interest most right now?
Ooh, yeah, we could start with let's start with like the ecosystem being attacked. Maybe like the PyPI or the VS Code extensions. Either one of those should
Yeah.
be fairly interesting to dig into. Thanks, Brian. Brian's CEO of Open Context. It's a great company. Definitely look into it. Anyway, sorry. So yes. Pull up this
Cool. Okay.
article if
So
I
let's,
can. Again,
yeah,
it's super slow.
I'll bring up PI. We'll talk about PyPI, right? Or PyPI, whatever
Yes.
you want to call it. And I know we talked about this recently, right? With NPM, the number of packages that are in NPM that exploded there for about a month because there was a drive. It looked like it was some sort of marketing drive. Like, people were just creating packages to look like up their search engine optimization almost, right? We're seeing definitely an increase in the amount of attacks against against these package repositories, these package managers, right? And it makes sense, right? Like we've talked about this for years, how these are weak points in the overall code pipeline, the infrastructure pipeline for actually pushing things out, right? And it's fulfillment of those prophecies or of those expectations that we've had for a number of years. So in this case, right, there was, let's see what it is, right? They disabled the ability for users to sign up and upload new packages because of the volume of malicious users and projects being created, and especially with multiple PyPI administrators on leave, right? Makes you wonder how big that team actually is. And I mean, if you look at module counts, that's what I was just going to do. Modulecounts.com, I believe it is. Maybe that's wrong.
Oh yeah. I had this bookmarked. Hold on, let me see.
Yeah, it's just taking a minute to pull up. There we go. Yeah. I mean, obviously, like you see the big increase in NPM there. That it was April timeframe. But if we drop that off, Maven's bigger, but PyPI is just below Maven. But it doesn't look like it's been anything that crazy from PyPI recently. But they're still looking at 200 packages a day. They're that are dropping in there, but it probably means that the number of new packages that were being pushed out on a daily basis was requiring more actual analysis, and that's why they temporarily disabled the ability to push new packages. I mean, and all of these are popular targets, right? Like, active malware, right? There's multiple different places. I mean, the article itself references some stuff out of NPM, right? Like that are dropping Trojans and other things like that. But I would be interested to see what people are pushing into PyPI, right? Like from a, are they trying to, like what the malicious packages are actually doing? I mean, that's just more out of my curiosity. Like I wonder what's being attempted there. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm kind of rambling across it.
Yeah, let me share my screen and then I can give my thoughts a little bit more clearly here. So um, let's go present. There we go. All right. And break this off into another tab. Here we go. Okay. Should see it. Oh, right. Wrong one. But you know what? It's fine. I'll just move this tab into this. And can you see module counts?
No.
Or are you still seeing Python?
Yeah, I'm still seeing Python. There we go.
Cool.
Now we can see module counts. Yep.
So like if you look at it, there's not, statistically or numerically any kind of huge jump. It's not significant enough to be like over the last 7 days, it's just been insane, right? Yeah, there's a like upward trend, but it's nothing that's like, yeah, just crazy, crazy bad. Having said that, or with that information in mind, what I think is happening is there must have been other indicators. It probably wasn't the same as, I guess what I'm saying is it probably wasn't quite the same as NPM that had like this massive amount of packages being uploaded. It might be more of other markers for success, basically a compromise and successful takeover of accounts. Basically, there might be actual successful ATOs occurring. It might just be that some of this stuff is a little bit above the capabilities of what they had in place to prevent it at the time. And so they took a precaution, and it may not have been about the actual number of packages being uploaded. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what I think is it's not like a crazy amount of malicious things being uploaded. It's my guess.
Yeah, which is, I mean, yeah, I think that's what I was trying to say is that it doesn't look like it was that same sort of NPM issue that we saw before, but maybe it's just an increase in the number of packages that they have to analyze because they do look malicious, right? So there's a finite number of people behind any of these package managers that can actually analyze, look at a code base. And I know they automate things, like they automate some of the analysis to see if a package is reaching out to, dangerous places or doing things that are probably unintentional or malicious. So any of those that jump into that pipeline just means it's more work for the team behind the scenes to actually get through those packages and accept or deny them. So
yeah, exactly. That's right. I think that there's probably just mechanisms that can't handle what was going on in the background, and it's just a way to stem the bleeding.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and that brings us to the VS Code one, right? And we're going to see more and more of this, right? There's all of these different mechanisms for extensions, for packages to be installed within the context of different applications that run on your devices, on your systems, on your CI/CD pipeline, on your developer workstations, and anything that has the ability to actually execute code is a potential avenue for exploitation and installation of Trojans, data stealing, like any malicious action, right? So, it's no longer that, it's easy for someone to just go, email out a bunch of links and catch people. I think the attackers themselves are getting more savvy, but they also want into more sensitive data, right? So, you think of large organizations or large malicious organizations, nation state actors, they probably don't care as much about the consumer level exploitation as they do. We want to look at specific organizations And so we're going to start to attack those watering holes. Like these are all watering hole attacks. If you go back to, the 60s again, Crocs and socks of security. But
60s.
Yeah, something like that, right? Well, you go read some of those papers, man. I have some if you want to like talk about security and like how it hasn't changed. Speaking of which, that's what my talk's about, for Cybertracks, and that's the one I'm starting to post.
Okay.
But so what am I going with this? Okay, so these are all watering
hole
hole
attacks.
attacks.
Sorry, they're watering hole attacks from the 60s with Crocs and socks.
Yeah, with Crocs and socks. And we have new stickers too. So sorry. Yes. So watering hole attacks. These are all watering hole attacks. Nation state actors or more sophisticated attackers want access to large organizations, sensitive data that probably isn't on, normal consumer level machines. And in order to get that access, they're looking at what those computers are actually doing and what those organizations, like how they build code, right? Like those sophisticated attacks will use things like malicious, like VS Code plugins. If I can take over a popular VS Code plugin, there's millions of developers that are using that in sensitive organizations, in sensitive places, that give me access to source code and other things. It's a gold mine is basically what it boils down to, which makes me also wonder what they're doing with that data when they get it, right? I know as an engineer, you're probably, the same way. I know I'd be feeding this stuff into Elasticsearch, right? Into AI models, into other places behind the scenes. And I know some of it shows up on the deep web for sure. But what worries me is what doesn't show up there. Like the actors that don't actually post that data, that don't actually push it out, and we just don't know about it. Because, out of these malicious VS Code extensions, or what PyPI is actually finding for every malicious package, every malicious extension that we find, there's probably at least one or two that we don't.
Yeah.
Sad to say, right? But that's the case. There are techniques that malicious users or malicious actors use that we probably haven't detected yet.
For sure, it's a cat and mouse game, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, I mean,
that goes back to like, what protections do you take and put into place given what things you're trying to protect and what resources you have at your disposal.
Yeah.
To accomplish that.
Yeah, it's all that blast radius. Okay, what happens? Like we can no longer assume no compromise, and this goes for your applications as well as what you're building. When you're talking to developers, you shouldn't expect that your application is never going to get compromised. That's just not realistic in today's environment. So what do you do to, number one, protect against it? Number two, detect when something goes wrong. How do you respond to it? How long does it take you to respond to it? Are you logging? Are you auditing the right information to make sure that you know when something goes wrong with your application, and when compromise potentially has happened? If we don't have that sort of data, if we don't have those sort of actions in place, that sort of process, that's when stuff lives for 6 months, a year, whatever else it is. And that actually goes back. There was a Wired article. Oh, dang it! Now I'm pulling up stuff that we didn't talk about, right?
Well, and I will say, Larry Leisure. I was gonna say, yeah. So Larry mentions potential fund for IDE plugins to introduce promising code. We are going to talk about malicious plugins, but kind of makes me think about, it just made me think of like, kind of sparked an idea of like a malicious plugin that kind of acts like a co-pilot, but instead introduces like super vulnerable code. Anyways, cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you pulling up?
I'm finding it. There was a really good long form article, and it was a couple of weeks ago. And it Mandiant. Okay, untold story of the boldest supply chain hack ever. Right, and so this is, it actually is reporting. Let me post it here. It's reporting on what the Solarwinds hack from a couple of years ago, right? Or whenever that actually happened. I say a couple of years.
Still feels fresh.
Yeah, I know. It still feels pretty fresh. But these guys actually talked to Mandiant and the DoD, and it's a long form article. It'll take a little bit to actually get through. But it's super interesting on how they actually detected it and how long the actors had access to SolarWinds before they started to do things, and what they actually, I mean, it all goes back to supply chain, right? And SolarWinds, now it's been a little while since I read this, so I'm like, dropping into it.
Wow.
Scanning through the article, but like I said, it's long form. It'll take a little bit to get through, so we probably don't want to like read through it on the
no, definitely not.
Yeah,
it is a very long article. Yeah. But what's the TLDR?
TLDR is they compromised the build system. They inserted a backdoor into SolarWinds and waited until that package was deployed to multiple sensitive different places, right? The targets that they wanted it to be. Yep. And so it wasn't even like the build server that had been compromised, the code had been inserted. They were very intelligent about how they went about it. Like it was even documented, like very like in a manner that was similar to the developers themselves. And then hidden in like a binary blob inside of one of the posts, like as they pushed it across. So it was very, very difficult to detect because they had done real analysis of the developers. It wasn't just drive-by. This was definitely very much a pre-planned rollout, and they were lucky to catch it in the way that they did, right? Like there was some weird stuff that went on, but they were lucky to catch it, basically. So give that one a read. I mean, it's definitely worth the 15, 20-minute read on it, because it'll give you some ideas on, okay, what is it that we need to look for behind the scenes? How would we actually detect that from a build server perspective, right? If something is compromised, if my application is getting like strange, signatures or whatever out of it, because it was a signed binary, right? Like they inserted themselves into that process before it was actually deployed.
Yeah, Larry mentions that. Yeah, I remember the story. It's been a while, but yeah, the story. I remember living through that. Also, some follow-on denials of software due to them being owned by SolarWinds, but during change control. But anyways, yeah, I mean, I guess we could probably post the next article too and just roll right into it. I mean, this kind of all is related, really. I'll just post the malicious code extensions. Another way to attack develop. And take a step back for a second and zoom out of all of this. Think about what it's like to be a developer these days. For real.
Yeah,
it sucks, man. Like it's hard, and I speak from all I do is write code all day long, right? Every day, and man, it's tough, right? You have a lot of considerations, so many considerations in the way that you write things, which features you're going to focus on, product desires, et cetera, bugs, trade-offs. All of the issues that you work through, just making things work. I know a lot of people, most people who watch this podcast have written some level of code and struggled and, hit their head against a wall and just sort of like, had to troubleshoot these things and feel that frustration and overcome those problems. So then you take all of that you go through, then you say, all right, by the way, also like, your extensions might attack you. Your packages might attack you. You may do nothing wrong at all. Your build system might just be compromised and token stolen. So the amount of considerations that goes into, or the amount of consideration that an engineer has to take into account when they're just like building something these days, I feel like it's quite a cognitive load. And then you've got things like ChatGPT, right? And Copilot and things like that are meant to help, but then there's questions of, is that actually, helping or hurting? And anyways, I say all this just because it's been in my mind, like, man, it is hard to be an engineer these days. I'm not saying it was ever easy, but I feel like there's a lot expected of a developer these days.
Yeah.
Anyways, going back to the extensions, I don't know if you want to give the TLDR since I've been ranting.
Yeah. So realistically, Checkpoint does analysis here of malicious extensions that they've seen in VS Code, right? So nothing gets spared. They talk about um, a Java extension that says it's supposed to make Java look prettier or whatever it is in VS Code. Same with npm or Darkula Dark, right? And most of these are just attempting to steal private data, right? Yeah, some of them do shell injection, Python, VS Code, actually creating code on the fly to exploit and steal data, right? And I mean, the biggest thing is that they're, if you look at the number of times that these have been installed, some of them are like thousands. They're 45,000 different installs for the Darkula Dark, the one that actually is posting. Yeah, I mean, at this point, it doesn't look like it's data length, right? Like what they actually post there is information about the system itself. So maybe they've got more that they're trying to do with those, but at the very least, it's pushing data that you would not want to a malicious location, right? Yeah, but yeah, tens of thousands, right? I'm with you as far as like the developers go, right? Like what they actually have to be worried about, because they view those IDE tools, those IDE extensions, and even the package managers to some extent, although they're learning not to. They view them as trusted sources of data, trusted sources of applications to help them generate code, right?
Yeah, I mean, and well, before I dig into that, I will say it out of 50,000, roughly, they said like 50,000 extensions that are on the marketplace. It was only a few that were malicious. So it's not like it's a widespread issue, but when it was an issue, it was installed in like a lot of places, at least in that one case.
Yep.
So, and yeah, it's like, man, I actually read through this and kind of glossed over that whole Python VS Code bit. But man, that is super crazy. That's exactly what I was kind of thinking about earlier when I like took a pause when Larry was. I mean, this one's just straight out injecting, not recommending. But in any case, it's still like, and it's interesting how the one just looks for common file paths, like under app data to like steal databases from basically your browser, your Discord. So all that's pretty cool. I mean, not cool for the people that have it stolen, but whatever. It's an interesting attack. But just straight out injecting malicious code is pretty insane. But yeah, it's funny when you look at, because I was thinking about it too, like with engineers, you also, I don't know about you, but when I've done training with engineering and I've just generally interacted with engineers, it's interesting how their like software engineers specifically, their idea of like what they should be securing and what security is really doesn't necessarily often align with what I look at when I think you're a programmer. Like you should be concerned with code security, and then you find that they're basically getting advice from many sources. I don't know, maybe it's like their third-party consultants, maybe it's like, I don't know, some talk they watch, maybe they just went on YouTube because they were interested in like, how do I secure my environment? And it's just most of the time the focus is like completely wrong. And I don't think it's their fault. I think it's that, I don't know. Who knows? We could sit here and we could probably talk for 3 hours about how the industry has pushed this, that, and the other for various reasons and how that probably impacted. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like it's usually like if code security is usually top of mind, it's typically like, are my dependencies secure and up to date? Because I think this is definitely a case with supply chain attacks. Like it's been pumped very heavily by the industry. So that's like their number one concern usually. Are their builds secure? Which is reasonable for sure, but it's not top of mind when I think of secure code, right? and or encryption, just being interested generally in like encryption slash hashing, but cryptography, we'll say. Um, and it's like, man, there's like so many other issues like day to day that actually impact development. And that seems to, I don't know. Like I said, we could talk. Maybe it's the CBT training, CBD, the CBD training, the CBT
CBD.
training that
What kind of training you
developers are
taking
getting
over
into.
there, Ken?
I know, right? We have very relaxed engineers.
Yes.
No, but yeah, I don't know, man. Who knows? We could, like I said, we could pontificate on the reasons why, but it is interesting that it's interesting because you have people that actually want to learn about, or like want to do the right thing, want to introduce security, but don't like necessarily know how, even though we have all these resources and all these organizations and
Yeah.
anyways.
Well, I mean, I think it all, okay. I don't know if I want to do like a full hot take on this, right? But my view on it is that we've always searched, and the bit in business in general has always searched for this for the silver bullet that solves the security issue, right? We're getting better at realizing that that's never going to be the case. But if I look over the course of my career, like first getting onto the internet, um, and first coding, doing everything there was definitely this, well, security is just like put a firewall in place, right? That'll protect us. And managers, like executives of different businesses had this feeling that, oh, okay, that's basically it. If there's a problem with security, I just go out and buy a product that solves it for me and I move on. And there was never a real discussion about threat and about the risks that was associated with different business activities being online, like serving up data, like processing data. Like there was never a true discussion on risk. And so even though we're training developers, we're training people on thinking about the threats that are involved with building applications, putting them online, as long as management and the business leaders don't understand the risks that are involved, we're never going to get there. We're never going to have a true like security process in place. And that's where we start to fall down, right? Like it's this kind of miscommunication or misunderstanding of what security actually is, as opposed to, hey, it's a point solution. As long as I like spend, this amount of money a year, that we're going to be totally secure. Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's probably, yeah, you're right. It's influenced by wherever the engineer is working out of or has worked out of in the past, and who was running, probably very likely whoever was running security at that time. So
Yeah.
and plus outside influences and a mixture of influences for sure, but absolutely going to come from like the people you trust that are paid and hired and professional, security people. Security is also like such an overloaded term too. I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax, which we don't have to get into and probably shouldn't. But in any case, it's an overloaded term. So, when I say security, what does security mean to you? That's going to, even if you put 4 AppSec people in a room, I guarantee you that you're going to have different answers. So it's no surprise that engineers also have different answers for what they should actually be caring about.
Yeah.
Well, I did also want to mention something because I wanted to disagree with you a little bit, actually.
Okay,
although it's not really a disagreement. But anyways, you said you think the industry is getting better at saying, hey, there is no such thing, or at least recognizing there's no such thing as a silver bullet. And I do think, and so on that point, I think overall, yes, practitioners have agreed that they have to buy, unfortunately, or build, unfortunately, different solutions for different problems and kind of put them together and build out the things they need individually. Having said that, there is this trend I've seen in newsletters, on Twitter, thought leadering, where people are saying, well, budgets are shrinking. There's going to be more people want simplification of their tool ecosystem, which does make sense given when you go into like, yeah, sure, if you go to like a 30-person company, it was different. But if you're going into most like, we'll say large enterprise style businesses, you're going to have a crazy amount of different tools with crazy amounts of different contracts. And I get it. I get why there's like this desire to um, pare down, to slim out your all these different tools. But there has been a push on that recently, like I said. So I think there's a recognition that there is no such thing, and there won't be such thing as a silver bullet. And at the same time, I think that people are advocating now to like try and slim down your tool set and try to get tools that do multiple things, versus having a single purpose tool.
Yeah.
I have no idea if it's worth buying Sonar Dev Edition.
Sonar Cube. Yeah, we haven't looked at that, so we'd have to look at it.
We can ask. I know somebody who has worked with it, and I'm sure you do too, so we can ask.
Yep. Yeah, Gigabin, that's probably worth jumping into Slack to actually ask that question, because there's going to be people that have actually have used that on a day-to-day basis. That isn't necessarily one that we've done, that Ken or I have used. Yeah, as far as like slimming down, right, like reducing budgets, I get that. I think where I was going was there was more like recognition that security is not just a single. It's not solved. It's never going to be solved, right? It's like development. It's never going to be solved. I still do run into organizations where they just have never taken it into account, right? Like recently, running into, talking with the developers at a specific organization, and they're telling us that, well, the way that they had done their development 15 years ago was basically to build these different environments and deploy them into their production environment, and then they never touch them again, right? Because people depend on them.
15 years?
15 years. So they're running like Linux packages and things like that 15 plus years out of date. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah. Surely no.
I wish I was joking. And I mean, I haven't come across that.
The hardware hasn't been touched either.
I mean, I believe the hardware has been touched, but since they had all these packages and containers that they had built out that were serving production customers, and they didn't want it to affect that production pipeline of, from a business perspective, they still live, right? And so,
I was thinking, as a security person, didn't survive. Yeah, which means that they're running these like low
virtualized.
Yeah, that's not gonna like what it needed for resources before versus what it needs now. I mean, it's probably like a super overpowered. Not to digress, but that's just interesting to me that you probably have some serious hardware running some pretty low cost software. Well, anyways, all right.
Yes,
it's just weird.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's definitely not ideal, right? But the thing is this came out talking to one of the security guys that had been there for a few years, and again, this goes back to, you got to feel for the developers that are not given the time to actually go back and fix stuff, right, from a security perspective. And it all kind of is driven by the fact that the people that own the applications, or the business owners, don't recognize security as a real like threat or risk to the business, to the money that's actually coming in from what they've built previously. And so they continue on, and that security backlog, that security debt, tech debt that exists, just builds and builds and builds until it becomes untenable to actually fix, right? And I mean, that's one of the things that, this organization, to their credit, is trying to change that mindset. They've realized that this is not sustainable, but now there's this huge problem in the room of how do you take something that's that far out of date, update it for modern standards using secure packages, and get to a secure state in a reasonable amount of time for a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, I don't think reasonable is going to come into play when you do, because like something like this is a massive rewrite. You know what I mean? Like it's not a small. Yeah. It's not. Nothing's going to be considered reasonable by a business owner in that at this stage, right? 15 years later, which is a good argument for like incremental pauses to tackle tech debt. But yeah, obviously it's a little late for that with them. But I think their expectations kind of in that case, you have to modify your expectations. It's not going to be reasonable. It's going to
Yep.
be overly expensive. It's going to suck. It's going to take a long time. And you're going to have to do it because, eventually that's not going to work anymore.
They do. Well, and that's just it. That's part of the reason that, I've started to become involved with them, right? Is because they've realized it's a problem, but it's also because their customers started to demand, hey, we want to know what's going on with with the data that we are providing to you, right? Like we're using the service. And all of a sudden they're realizing that stuff's not getting patched, or they're seeing, problems that have existed for, 10 years, that, all of a sudden it calls into question what their program actually looks like. And, at that point, it finally is bubbling up to the business as, oh crap, if we don't do the security stuff, we're not going to keep these clients, right? Like it seems like we don't ever make that connection until the risk is a business risk, not just a pure security risk, right? And the business risk comes into it, but I feel like there's been miscommunications in this organization, not to the guys that are there now, but in previous security iterations, right? To your point, that they failed to properly communicate what the threat and the business risk was of not performing security actions, of not doing the crocs and socks of security, and keeping things up to date, giving your developers time to do this, because now they have to pay the piper, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's but that is the thing too. Is that like you have to advocate, but sometimes the business just doesn't want to do it, and it's always like, did I advocate well enough? And if you didn't get what you wanted, you think you didn't, but sometimes it's just a business decision.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I don't know. Like, did you want to go into? There's a couple articles that are based off of like essentially. I think one's useful from a couple perspectives, knowledge, but also like potentially as you're crafting attack payloads or like running into. Here, I'll just post it. Repost it. Rick had originally posted this, so let me just put it back into general. Actually, here, let me put it on the YouTube portion first, and then
Cookie bugs.
Repost in Slack. Yep.
Cookie security is so interesting, but yeah, go ahead.
It is. Well, no, actually, that's what I was gonna say. Is like it's interesting because of like I think the thing that actually I was surprised by is the empty cookie from this list. That was the one thing that actually did surprise me, was not having a cookie name at all was possible. So I don't know, like I probably knew that and forgot, but man, you know how it goes. After a while, you retain stuff, and then some stuff you just lose. But anyways, that was interesting. I know that someone had mentioned in the channel that they were not familiar with cookie prefixes. So yeah, you've got a host and secure prefix for cookie naming conventions. Does exactly like what you would imagine. Let's see what else is interesting off this list. The Chrome stuff, I guess, is pretty interesting. Definitely useful for the Chrome bug. The Chrome bug, and at least like for a little while, the Chrome bug and the empty cookie name value. I could see that coming into play when you're doing a test and you need to do some sort of bypass, or I don't know, some sort of wonkiness. That could be useful. Because the text page just
Cookie
anything
injection
sticks out for you?
Yeah, cookie smuggling. Like I always liked using cookies for like platform identification too, right? Like oftentimes we've now suppressed information about what the platform is behind the scenes, right? As far as like what the architecture is that's actually running an app. But a lot of times you can tease that out pretty quick by what the cookie names are, right? Like, ASPX net cookie ID or whatever it is, right? Like it's pretty telling that there's a .NET application behind the scenes. Some of them are more subtle than that, but yeah, the the browser behavior drives a lot of this, which is why I enjoy seeing the actual research behind the scenes on testing out how the different browsers perform and what they actually do. Cookie smuggling gets to be pretty interesting too, with the semicolons at the end. Um, yeah, just because the way that header parsing actually happens, right?
Did
Um,
you
yeah,
did you see the Zope mentioned there? I've never even heard of Zope. It's like a Django, or excuse me, Python
Python.
framework. If
Hmm.
you hadn't heard of it, I'm curious if anybody, if can you put it in, if you have used this, please pop into Slack and say that you've used it and provide an experience if you feel so inclined, because I never heard of it, and that's interesting. Because I've heard Jetty, we've all heard of
Yeah.
Jetty, Tomcat, Undertow, but Soap I've never heard of.
Hmm.
Pyramid, yeah.
Similar. Oh, Plone, right? Okay, so is it pyramid related? Let's see, I mean, I have heard of Plone before. Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of cookie parsing is, yeah, that's such a like per framework tech stack library, yeah, tech stack thing. As for like a lot of honestly HTTP headers, they get processed in all kinds of different funky ways, which is
Yeah.
part of your contextual security analysis. Let's see here, configuration. Yeah,
Yep.
cool. I don't know, man. For me, there was nothing else super interesting there. But
Yeah.
it's a good article. It's like, yeah. I mean, nothing other than the stuff we've already mentioned. I think, yeah, it's pretty useful overall. We had another one as well. Sorry, I'm pulling up once again, going slow as I pull up these links.
You want to? Do you want to talk the AI one or Bat Loader? Which?
Yeah, I was thinking about the bat loader one. Just real. I mean, you know what? Let's talk about Rahul. Let's talk about Rahul. So Rahul Zadeh put together a list, and I'm trying to find where I put that list. But he put
I've got it
together a
here.
list. Can you post that? Yeah. So he just put together a list of reading material. Like it's a pretty comprehensive list of different reading material for different types of AI related attacks. Highly recommend going to that repo and just perusing it. They talk about prompt injection and fiddling as well with just like the general data models. There's like two other main categories of attacks at least that I had seen, and still myself need to read more up on. But yeah, we just wanted to mention that Rahul had put this out, and let me give his Twitter name as well. It's the same as his GitHub handle, actually. I think it's just RZ3
Yeah.
or Zade.
Well, I mean, AI
Yeah.
stuff is. I mean, obviously, it's kind of it's the new hotness, right? Like everybody wants to dive all in. And I know we've had some discussions in Slack about it, right? About how it's going to change what we do on a day-to-day basis, right? If if a LLM can actually peruse code for secure code review, right? Like look for different patterns and anti-patterns, and what does that actually look like? How does it change what we actually do on a day-to-day basis? And this isn't even like, hey, we're targeting the AI specifically, which is what Rahul has put up here, right? Like the different attacks that you can run against an AI system, right? But from a general like, hey, how does it affect my day to day as an AppSec person? I start to think of how things have changed for us over the last 20 years or whatever as it is, right? Like initially the static analysis tools were supposed to solve code review, period, but they never did, right? Like there's always aspects of reviewing what's coming out of the AI, whether or not it's appropriate, training it over time, or learning to use those systems and learning to, and this is where I see it going, right? Like we're going to learn over time how to use AI to improve the processes that we have in place, what we want it to identify, right? Like, okay, so like simple patterns in, in Django or whatever it is, like what we can build into like a semgrep rule from a fairly easy perspective, right? Like that is probably something that we could train an AI on very easily. But the more nuanced, right, like authorization checks that are happening in code or in different locations are going to have to be trained. Like those AIs are going to have to be trained over time. And that's where it becomes like being able to recognize the patterns that developers use that are required, like the different security controls as they're built out in code, and then presenting them to the AI. That's probably more of what we're going to do in 10 years than what we do now. It may not necessarily be that we are looking at code on a day-to-day basis, but we are identifying those patterns and then feeding those patterns into the AI model so that it can then go out and do the hard part of parsing through the code on a line-by-line basis. I don't know.
Thanks for my product pitch, bro.
Yeah, there you go. Because yeah, I mean, basically, that's
the whole point. You're saying patterns. I've heard shapes used, and it really comes down to getting some level of, like I said, contextual sort of information that provides you with direction to go. That's really what we need. And so I agree. I think it will become a much more informed, much quicker set of tasks for us, and allow us to focus on the things that matter. It's going to take some time, but that's where I agree with you. I think that's where it's going, where it's headed. And that's really what technology does for us in general, right? Is it offloads the tedious stuff, usually the tedious stuff, with the idea being we put our effort into more useful things. I don't know if that's always the case, but that is the idea anyways.
Yeah, but well, to go back to Rahul's list there, right, and the adversarial attacks against an AI, are there any of those that are? I mean, I know you probably haven't been through the full list yet. You haven't read everything, but what is it that stands out to you when you start to talk about adversarial attacks against an AI?
Well, yeah, I mean, the most practical one I've seen is prompt injection, right? So sometimes you're getting out stuff that is expected, sometimes unexpected. I think prompt injection attacks are the one I've been spending the most amount of time reading about, trying to wrap my head around. The other attacks are actually there. Like I said, there's like at least I think 4 attacks, different types of it. Let's see, privacy attacks, perturbance text, model stealing, risk management, prompt injection, toxicity. So there's a few different categories here. I haven't really read up on anything other than the prompt injection related stuff yet. So
yeah, one that gets interesting to me, and I know this is the one that a lot of companies fear, especially when it comes to Copilot, is just kind of the privacy implications of feeding data and code into an AI system and then having that exposed, right? So the unintentional consequence of, hey, here is a code base that does a bunch of stuff. I want you to analyze it for X, Y, and Z. But then the model itself takes that code, incorporates what it finds, and then uses that for subsequent searches and subsequent requests, which means that other users of that model can then start to pull data out about what was used to actually train that model, right? And that has to be the case, right? Otherwise, the model is not a continuous kind of learning model. It doesn't necessarily learn the context, to your point, if we don't allow it to take what we ask it and improve itself over time, right? And so it becomes a really interesting problem, right? Like I've seen the prompt a couple of those attacks against an AI model that'll tell it it'll give you the prompts that were given to actually create the model itself, right? Like
Mhm.
these are the different as you're responding to these are the different rules that are in place for you as a model, and what you're actually allowed to respond to, how you're supposed to respond to things, right? That sort of interaction. But it also has the limits on what they're actually allowed to be exposed. So it gives an attacker an ability to do more of the prompt injection behind the scenes. But again, it goes back to that privacy of, hey, what was used to actually train this model? Can we identify what that is? And can we pull that data back out? Because it could potentially have sensitive data, PII, in there that could be used by an attacker maliciously, right? Like, I mean, that's one that becomes interesting to me. And I know that's why people have heartburn with Copilot and a couple of the other models that are out there, is because we don't know what it's actually going to do with that data after. Yeah, even if you put restrictions in place. Yeah, I mean, that was just an interesting one that's been on top of mind for me outside of the prompt injection.
Yeah. No, I mean that's kind of the gist of all of these attacks, right? Is that you're essentially harnessing what you're manipulating the inputs to the LLM so that it does things that its designers did not intend for uh, I can't speak to occur. I will say this. I'm going to post this link. Here's a concrete example of doing something like that. So the idea is that essentially Bing Chat. The attack works like, if I'm reading this right, I kind of glossed over it real quick, but it sounds like I have prompted the AI to crawl a website and provide a link that was on that site that is now fed into a user who's in like Bing's chat. It gets posted as like, in this case, I think like a executive or laptop sales or something like that. And they say, hey, could you do me a favor? Can you go to this link? And then the person clicks that link, and then obviously some badness happens. That's kind of the concrete example of, what just one low level example of what could happen by manipulating and tainting the inputs to LLMs. So, yeah.
That's super interesting, right? Like you start to think about attacking the users that are using the LLM and what they currently have access to. So, right, like, yeah, would be an interesting, like there's all sorts of new avenues that are opening up, and I'm sure we'll see some good research over the next
I
few
saw
years. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Did you see? Like, there's been a bunch of stuff. I can't remember which of the platforms, but I remember one of them. Like, they had gotten the source code. They got the AI agent to provide them the source code to the AI agent. They also gave them like other stuff that shouldn't have been shown to them, infrastructure or code wise. I really can't recall. But yeah, I mean, it's man. If you thought writing secure code was hard before, holy
Yeah.
shit. I mean, man, what a trip creating a safe AI has got to be. And I know that, there's been what's his face? He was up on I never remember his name. Altman was
Mhm.
was up asking for regulation and all of that.
Yeah.
Which was interesting too, because apparently if I'm not mistaken, like I think he admitted like he doesn't have like stock options and doesn't take like much of a salary or anything like that, just enough to cover some bills, something like that. I don't know. I was like, that's a whole other thing I don't want to go off on, but I was like, what? Anyways, like, well, I just do it because I love it. Well, anyways, yeah. So it's got to be a hard problem to solve, is all I'm trying to say. I know that there's a company that won the Innovation Sandbox. I believe Hidden Layer. That's their whole thing. They're trying
Mhm.
to tackle that. I think we talked about it post RSAC. But yeah, tough problem to solve. So it should be very interesting over the next few years. The last few years were interesting, but yeah, the next
Yeah.
few years should be interesting as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been like it all comes from the interest in ChatGPT, right? Like it's something that is consumer interactable, right? I guess I should say something that because AI has been around for a while. Like we've gotten machine learning models, like everything that's been there, but the LLMs, the large language models or whatever they call them, right? Like the fact that people can now interact with it and are realizing the power behind the scenes, right? Because I mean, Copilot's been out for a while. Like we've had some of these concerns and discussions, but it hasn't risen to. I get more questions from just general friends and family that aren't in the tech industry about AI and Chat GPT specifically than I've ever had on like any other kind of security topic, within the last 6 months, right? Like everybody wants to talk about it because they have gone to openai.com and they've interacted with the model and they realize that this model can tell them about their own personal experiences, right? Their own industry, talking to a doctor about like recommendations for drugs and things like that based on, what ChatGPT actually knows and like how well it's doing. Like I've had more discussions that route than I have about any other kind of security topic. And there's a general level of uneasiness around AI outside of the tech industry. I don't know if you've experienced that. I mean, have you had interactions with other people asking you about it?
Yeah, it's like the only time anybody thinks anything I do is cool, or like,
That's true.
like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, or not cool, but like it's relevant to their interests.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely have, and I'm happy. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about computers. Cool. Like, yeah, no, honestly, it's a great segue into, having a conversation about technology. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've had questions come up about it. What could go wrong? Isn't it scary? All this stuff, and then, like, well, yes and no.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
there's definitely concerns, but um, do I think it's going to be Skynet? Not right now, not
Yeah.
at this moment, but you know, you know, but it's evolving pretty quick. So but that does remind me. I actually had a moment. I was so proud of this over the weekend. For once, the one time these damn skills that we've spent decades acquiring actually came into it, actually were useful in the real world. For once, I was all stoked. This weekend, I had to pick a lock because temporarily we found the keys, but we had lost some keys, and I was like, "All right, I need to get in this thing." So, or excuse me, for training purposes, I picked a lock. Anyways, because I live where I live. But anyways, for training purposes, I picked the lock, and it was really awesome. It like popped it, in under 20 seconds. I felt so cool. I was like, I'm a total badass. It's like, no, it's like, dude, decades of sitting at this desk and going to these conferences and like doing all this work and acquiring all these skills and reading all these books and learning all these things that are never applicable in the real world. Nobody cares about, or at least it feels like that, right? And then finally, I had my moment after 20 years.
Yeah.
Finally had
20
my
years.
moment.
Finally
It
had
only
your
took 20
moment.
years.
For that one time that you went to a conference, learned how to pick locks and realized it's fairly easy. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. That sounds about right. Like, well,
Yeah,
think
that's about
how
right.
like what the lock picking lawyer feels, right? Like he goes to law
Oh, yeah.
school, does all this stuff, and what is he known for? Picking locks on
Picking locks.
YouTube, right?
Yeah. Hey, but man, it feels good when it's actually useful and it's not
Yeah.
just some like hypothetical, thing,
Yeah.
skill. So yeah, anyways, it's nice. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah. Cool.
And I recommend everybody train themselves on lock picking.
Yes. It's a fun thing to do.
Actually, you know
And
what? On that note, since we're talking about it, and I just haven't put it away yet. My son's training kit, actually, believe it or not. They sell these clear locks with the pick sets that you can learn to, so yeah, you got like you know this, Seth. I'm just saying for other people who have never done this stuff and messed around with it. If you're watching and you have never messed around with it, they sell them. They're cheap. They're on like Amazon.
yeah, and if you want to get into it, I'm going to post tool, yeah, tool.us, right? TOOL, the organization of open organization of lock pickers. That's what it is. But they have instructions on how things are put together, and it's it's a fun little like puzzle to solve, right? If anyone's interested in it. Yeah, let's see. We've been going for a good hour. I know there's always more stuff to talk about. We'll leave a lot of that until next week. Please join us on Slack. Again, there's a lot of conversation that's going on there that, at this point isn't necessarily driven by Ken and I. A lot of the articles that we're starting to pull from nowadays are different, Talos and others that are in Larry and others that are in the pod or in the Slack channel are actually posting. And there's more stuff. They've got lots of questions. Like we recommended to Gigabin to jump on and ask about different products, different use cases. Jump in and do that. Yeah, Ken, anything else that you want to cover before we wrap things up for today?
No, just appreciate everyone's support. Sorry that we haven't been around much, but we are, I think, well, I don't know. You're saying you're going to Madrid, but for the most part, I think we're around for the most part.
Yeah, that
fairly.
one's it's going to be shorter than I wanted it to be, right? Like I was hoping to be there for a little while, but it's going to be a fly there, give a talk. I'll only have like a day turnaround, and then I'll be back. So, yeah,
That's not very fun. But all right, I get it.
that's
You
not
just came
very
back from
fun.
Europe, so you might as well go back or not.
Go
Yeah, I
back
get it.
again. Yeah,
Yeah, you might
exactly.
as well go back for a day or couple days, whatever.
Yeah, let me see what else. Yeah, that's about it for now. I know there's going to be other conferences. Please, if you have a conference that you would like to see the code review training at or would like us to speak at, let us know. We do want to do some of the live shows at different conferences and actually do panels. That was really fun at CactusCon. We got a couple other proposals out there to do the same sort of thing at other conferences, just to spur community involvement, but also to talk about the state of application security. Like that's the idea, is we want people's opinions on where things are going. Like talk about ChatGPT, or if you have recommendations for guests that you would like to see on the podcast, hit us up. We do have Evan, I know, is scheduled. We're going to have Shlomi back on soon. There's a few other people that are in the works as well. And yeah, would just love to, continue to grow the community and the discussion that we're having.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, with that, we'll see everybody next week. And yeah, go secure all the things. Yeah. At least for this week, right? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Ciao.
All right. Later. Bye.